Hey guys, today I'm going to review the Amazing Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 1. Now, what this collects is the entire Spider-Man run by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, And I'm going to review this whole book, or at least my favorite issues and the key issues from this book. I'm not going to go over an issue just because it features the first appearance of a villain. I'm not going to go over the issue because I just like it the most. I'm going to go over it because I might have something deeper to say about it. Some hidden nuance that not a lot of people realize, or deeper meanings, or even just historical facts that people would like to know. So as you can see, this book without its just jacket is a little plain, but that's okay, because there's a lot here. There's introductions, they're essentially essays by Stan Lee. You get 4 of them, and then there's a lot of bonus features in the back, and I'll review those as well. But first, here we have Amazing Fantasy 15. This book lives up to its name. Not only is it amazing as a fantasy, but it's also an amazing reality that this thing changed pop culture forever. This might be the most important comic book of the all time. It's definitely the most important comic book of the 1960s, and that's just my honest opinion. I mean, sure, Fantastic Four #1 is big. Sure, you have some DC comics from that time that might be important, but nothing compares to this, in my opinion. Absolutely nothing. And what I love about this issue is that it's only 11 pages. It's half the length of a normal 22-page comic, but they tell a story better than most 22-page comics in half that time. And sure, you can complain that some of the dialogue is hokey, like right here, but it doesn't matter. Like, it really doesn't matter. That criticism is so pointless, because number one, the book is from the 60s, okay? So, of course, it's going to be a little dated in some aspects. It's the principle of the fact that Stan Lee and Steve Ditko were able to tell a story this well with the time they had, with the time period they had to work within. And the fact that they were able to tell such a deep story, you know, it's just phenomenal. The other great thing about this issue is that Steve Ditko's art is just so phenomenal. He is perfect for Spider-Man. He has this really distinct, quirky art style, and it's just perfect for a character like Spider-Man. And then the book ends on perhaps one of the greatest lines ever written in fiction. With great power, there must also come great responsibility. So then the next key issue is Amazing Spider-Man #1. So, I'm gonna be honest, I'm really only covering this issue and the preceding issues because of the fact that they are, you know, key issues, but they're only key because of their number or the villain. It's not because they're some of the greatest issues of Spider-Man. And don't get me wrong, they're not bad. They're still really good stories. It's just, I want to say the first 12 issues of Spider-Man, nothing quite came close to Amazing Fantasy 15 in the art, but also in the writing. And I think this is because Stan Lee and Steve Ditko didn't quite know what to do with the character. And I'll get to Steve Ditko more in a second, and why I think he ultimately was the more important creator in this time period for the character. But don't get me wrong, though, Stan Lee is just as important as Steve Ditko. It's just, I think Steve Ditko is had a lot more to do with the stories at this certain time. But I will say, though, this video is dedicated to both of them. So, I'm not taking sides here on the who created Spider-Man argument. So for me, where Spider-Man really begins to reach the same heights as Amazing Fantasy 15 is in the first appearance of Mysterio. No, I'm not kidding. Hear me out, guys. Yes, the issue itself is not writing-wise much better than what you saw in the first 12 issues of Amazing Spider-Man, but it's the artwork. I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the art was a little more plain in those first 12 issues, and it didn't help that Jack Kirby did a few of the backup stories, which, as Jack may be the king, but he was not suited for Spider-Man. But then you have this issue, you have Ditko's distinct quirk all over it, and not just in terms of that, but also in terms of how he's good at expressionism, with the fact that Spider-Man just wearing a mask that has no eyes, no holes, just nothing. You don't see his face, but he still expresses himself so well in all of these panels where he's fighting Mysterio in the mist. And that's not the only time he does it in the issue. He does it twice. And then it's also got that distinct Ditko style of showing you how things work. He did that a lot too. I think this issue, say what you will about Mysterio as a character, but this issue art-wise is where Spider-Man became Spider-Man for me. So then the next key issue is Amazing Spider-Man 14, first appearance as a Green Goblin. Now, to me, Green Goblin is the definitive Spider-Man villain. He is everything a Spider-Man villain should be. He reflects what could have gone wrong with Peter's powers. He reflects what could have gone wrong if Peter didn't take that oath of responsibility. He just represents Peter as a person. He is a reflection. And to me, he's greater at doing that than, say, Dr. Octopus or Sandman or even Venom. It's just he's just a compelling character, and I think his first appearance is, I'd probably say this is the most, for me personally, this is the most important issue post Amazing Fantasy 15. In terms of story, it's not the most valuable of the post Amazing Fantasy 15 issues, but it's the most valuable to me, if that makes any sense. So then the next issue is Amazing Spider-Man Annual #1. This is amazing. This is a pop culture masterpiece. This is not just a comic book. This is a piece of pop culture history right here. And I'll tell you why. Sure, it's not the first appearance of Spider-Man, but it tells you who Spider-Man is as a character perfectly. 6 of his deadliest villains team up, and Spider-Man has to stop each and every one of them. And the Avengers aren't there to help. X-Men aren't there to help. He doesn't even want help, really. He just has to do it himself. And he fights each and every one of these foes on his own, on top of more. And it's 41 pages. It is the definition of the word epic. And I know that word is overused nowadays, but this truly is epic. And the issue gets better, because that's only half the issue. The other half is a bunch of pinups by Steve Ditko for all of Spider-Man's villains that have appeared up to that point. And then you have more of that distinct Ditko showing how things work underneath with how Spider-Man's powers work. A bunch of pinups where he just explains to you in explicit detail what Spider-Man can do and what he can't do. All 72 pages of this annual should be held in an art museum for pop culture, because this is, like I said, a pop culture masterpiece. So you know how I said earlier in the video that I'd cover 2 issues that I think are just some of my favorites and I don't think are key issues necessarily? Well, this is one of those 2. This is Spider-Man Goes Mad. This is an issue where Peter just loses it. He just feels like he's going crazy from the fact that he's Spider-Man. And he goes to see a psychiatrist about it. And let's just say that psychiatrist isn't who he claims to be. And I won't spoil it, but all I'll say is it's one of my favorite twist endings ever. It's, in fact, you know what? It might be a key issue. Not in a sense that it has a first appearance or that it's valuable. I think it's a key issue in showing Steve Ditko's talents outside of superheroes, because before Steve Ditko did Spider-Man, he did a lot of these weird sci-fi stories with twist endings. This is essentially a weird sci-fi story with a twist ending, and Steve Ditko applies it to Spider-Man, so voila, Steve Ditko. So then the next issue of mine that I think is just a favorite is The Amazing Spider-Man, The Man in the Crime Master's Mask. This is a two-part story from issues 26 to 27, and it's essentially Ditko telling a mobster movie, a 40s mob movie, with Spider-Man as the hero of the movie. And the Crime Master, to me, he's cooler than the Kingpin. He's basically the Kingpin, but wearing a mask, and he's not, you know, big or anything, but it's just, I love this. It's a great two-part issue. Also features Green Goblin, so of course I'm going to be partial to it from the get-go. And they kidnap Spider-Man. It's just a great, great issue. So then we have Amazing Spider-Man Annual Number 2. Now, Annual Number 1 was a 72-page behemoth. This was not. It mostly reprinted stuff, but that's not to say it didn't have any new content, because it had a 20-page story about Spider-Man meeting Steve Ditko's other most famous Marvel creation, Doctor Strange. And this issue, I think, is a great starting point if you're going to get into Doctor Strange, because it perfectly explains who he is from the view of an outsider. Because Spider-Man doesn't know who he is, and Spider-Man's just brought into this whole new world, and he doesn't know what's going on. And I think the best way to read this issue is if you're in a point of view like Spider-Man. You don't know who Doctor Strange is. So if you want to start reading Doctor Strange, then get this issue and read it. So then the book, we're in the last few bits of the book, and this might be the highlight. This is the highlight for a lot of people. This is issues 31 to 33. I won't spoil the whole plot, won't spoil the villain, but even though it's not one of my favorite Spider-Man stories, this probably is the most motivational of them, and it's also probably the one that represents who Peter is the most. Basic plot is Aunt May is going to die, and there's only one thing that can cure her. So Spidey has to go out and find this cure, but in the process he gets so angry fighting the villain that he destroys the whole lair, and it's gonna collapse on him, and he'll never get a chance to save Aunt May. So in issue 33, we have 5 whole pages of Spider-Man stuck under the roof and all this stuff, and he's just remembering why he's doing what he's doing and why he needs to get himself out of here and why he can't give up. So he is having a really hard time, but he's doing it anyways, and then he frees himself. Steve Ditko, again, with a character with no face, basically, that you can't see their face. You can see all the emotion, all the pain, all the anger and frustration in his eyes and stuff. And he's just wearing a mask. What a beautiful artist. So to end off this book, we have Steve Ditko's last Spider-Man issue. Now, Ditko never drew a cover for this issue. Same with his last Doctor Strange story. So we're really left with just the interiors. So the basic plot is about this guy who has a freak accident, just like Spider-Man, and he goes on a rampage across the city because he wants revenge for all the wrongdoings in his life. And then Peter goes to stop him, and then the guy is heralded as a hero in the end, even though Spider-Man is the real hero. And so, because this, Spider-Man gives up in a fit of rage, and he essentially says goodbye to everyone and just goes into his room to mope and just reflect on his life. And says goodbye to Aunt May and says she's the only thing I'll have when I'm awake. And I think this is representative of who Ditko was as a person. It was his metaphor and his way of saying goodbye to Marvel. Because he's just fed up with everything, and he's done with the world. He just wanted to say goodbye. He just wanted to go into hiding. And he essentially did. I mean, he did make some comics after Spider-Man for, like, DC and Charleston, but in terms of, like, major hits, he never really had anything after Spider-Man. And, yeah, it's just a really somber end, but it's a really great ending, and I think it was a bold move for Ditko to do that. And I don't think any creator has done it since in comics. So how the book ends is we have 3 essays by some Ditko fans. Then we have a lexicon, which is a guide to all of the issues in the book and what first appearances are in them. Then we have some unused covers, some original page art, the original Marvel bolt pen, which most of these people are dead now. May they all rest in peace. Then some reprint covers, and then the cover to this omnibus, or at least its first printing. And that ends Spider-Man Omnibus Volume 1. Now this book is out of print, and you can't really get it anywhere, but there is a way to get it, or at least half of it. There is this series of Marvel books called Spider-Man Epic Collection, and they have 2 volumes of all of Steve Ditko's work. Now, the first volume collects the first 17 issues. It is out of print, just like this volume right here. But Volume 2 is still readily available and contains issues 18 to 38 and Spider-Man Annual 2, I believe. So, get that book before it goes out of print if you want to read Steve Ditko's Spider-Man books, because that contains all of the best issues, in my opinion. The first book is just an introduction to what is to come. So, and hopefully they will reprint Volume 1 or this omnibus, because both of them are well worth their cover price. But go to in-stock trades and get these if they ever come back in print, and you won't regret it, because every Spider-Man fan should own these, in my opinion, more so than any other Spider-Man comic books. So, with that, ta-ta, everyone. Bye-bye.